Hello and muy buenas noches y bienvenidos todos. Welcome to everyone to the second debate in our series, Los Cien, Decision Sonoma 2022. My name is Fernando Carrillo and I'm a board member of Los Cien and the co-chair of the program committee. Si necesita traducción, en la parte inferior de la pantalla hay un botón que dice Translation. Haga clic y va a escuchar la dulce voz de Betsy Chávez, nuestra traductora para este evento. Muchísimas gracias, Betsy, por tu apoyo. Before we begin, the work of Los Cien is made possible by our generous premier partners and sustaining members, United Way of the Wine Country, River Rock Casino, Barbara Gasecci and Tony Kraft, the City of Santa Rosa, Leap Solutions, the City of Cloverdale, Sonoma Raceway, Palm Springs Vineyard, and Exchange Bank. Thanks to our sponsors for making Los Cien's work possible. I want to provide a quick update about our good friend Herman J. Hernandez. He's back at home, luckily, and even though he's not able to work with us right now, I'm sure he's watching from home. Fuerte abrazo, Herman. Now, I would like to introduce to my co-chair and partner, Patrick Mcdonald. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Fernando, and welcome all. Los Cien is a group focused on Latinx leadership and empowerment here in Sonoma County. And in the fall of 2021, after 12 years of producing more than 100 formal community awareness building conversations, the program committee and the board of Los Cien felt compelled to create the following program statement. Los Cien, Sonoma County exists to hold critical conversations on issues that concern the Latinx community and to uplift and illuminate Latinx experiences. Our intention is to build bridges towards solutions and changes that empower every community member. We respect all perspectives and we expect respect and professionalism in return. We are committed to holding these difficult conversations. Racism has a disparate impact on Asian, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. It is corroding our community and a threat to everyone who calls Sonoma County home. We believe its structures and ripple effects are threats to our community well-being and our democracy. We are unafraid of and unapologetic about exposing the oppression of racism. As Los Cien is committed to illuminating these issues and leaning into these hard conversations, we invite and welcome individuals and organizations that wish to join us to ensure and amplify racial justice progress and change in our community. Los Cien's vision is a vision of orgullo, or pride, and equity for the Latinx community in Sonoma County. And since 2010, Los Cien has worked toward this vision in order to advance belonging, trust, and equity for and with our whole community by engaging in sometimes hard conversations. But our intention is always to facilitate honest dialogue and elevate understanding because what affects the Latinx community affects everyone who calls Sonoma County home. And I'm really happy and excited to introduce our moderator for this evening, Ly. He is a senior at Pioneer High School, and we're so excited just to have a young voice to be able to ask questions to our candidates. He is planning to study mechanical engineering and work in energy and sustainability, which is exactly what our community and our world needs. Welcome to our superstar senior from Pioneer High School and our moderator, Ly.
Thank you so much. And I do really want to give a very brief thank you to the Los Cien team, especially Pat and Fernando for making this happen and having me on. It truly is a privilege. And thank you to our candidates and our audience for your participation in tonight's programs. Audience members, you are invited to write and share your questions on the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And for members watching this program on Facebook Live, you can share your questions in the comment area. Los Cien board members as well as volunteers are going to be sharing those questions with me. We have a few questions for the candidates to begin this program. For each question, I will announce the order which the candidates will answer in, as well as the time that you will have to respond. Candidates, make sure that you can see Fernando on your screen, who is going to be keeping track of the time and letting you know when your time is winding down or has expired. Fernando, Pat, or I may ask follow-up questions or clarifications to candidates if time permits. We're very excited to hear from our candidates on each of these questions, and we will be getting to them very soon. But first, I am very honored to introduce our three candidates for the superintendent position. First, we are joined by Amie Carter, who has been the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services for Marin County Office of Education since January of 2021. Dr. Carter has served as principal in various schools of Sonoma County and elsewhere, starting as a teacher in the year 2000. She states, "Education is my passion." Next, we have Ron Calloway, Superintendent at Mark West School District in Santa Rosa since 2010. Serving for over 30 years in education in Sonoma County schools, his campaign statement is "For our children, for our future." Lastly, Brad Coscarelli has served as principal of Hidden Valley Elementary School in Santa Rosa and also has served as principal and administrator at Santa Rosa High for the last 15 years. He states, "I want Sonoma County schools to be a national model." We welcome all three of you here this evening. So getting into the questions, over the course of this next hour, we are hoping to better understand in practical terms how each of the candidates would differ in addressing the key issues confronting K-12 education in Sonoma County. Keeping in mind that the mission of the Sonoma County Office of Education, SCO, is to foster student success through service to students, schools, and the community. For your opening statements, you will be given 90 seconds to answer, and the order will be Mr. Coscarelli, Mr. Calloway, and Dr. Carter. Within the mission of SCO, please describe your commitment and involvement with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and please share the how and the why of this work from a personal perspective and your perspective as a candidate. Mr. Coscarelli, take it away.
Well, thank you, He. Thank you for having me here, and I need to thank Los Cien for having this forum. It's incredibly important. For me, really my priorities are students and fiscal management, consolidation, and attraction and retention. And that really gets to the issue of equity. We have to acknowledge the problem. It does exist, and we have to make dramatic changes. We cannot keep the status quo. It must change immediately. We have to have no more tracking in schools, and we have to have access for every single student. You know, during my time at Santa Rosa High School as principal, I took this head on, and we were able to narrow the student achievement gap. This is something that I take very seriously. It's an injustice for our students in Sonoma County, and I will do everything I can in my power as Sonoma County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you.
Mr. Calloway.
Thank you. Obviously, if we look at a portrait of Sonoma County, we see where the issues lie in just the relative educational levels, how long you're going to live, what your income is by where you are living in this community by your zip code. We have to change that. If you looked back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, those stats have not changed. But our education system remains constant with that. As such, we need to change what we're doing. We need, as educators, to look at the cultural wealth of our communities and bring forward their experiences to us. We need, as educators, to go into their houses, into their communities, not have them come into our place of residence first, but go to them, learn from them, learn their experiences, create pathways for every child so that every child has an opportunity. If it's career and technical, fantastic. If it's college, beautiful. But every child needs an opportunity in our county. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Hi, I would say that equity is really why I am running. That is my commitment. It's why I entered education, is because I see education as the strongest path towards a bright future for all of our children. And the hope and the ideal in our nation is that education can be the great equalizer. We fall short of that continually, and there's a lot of reasons for that that are anchored in the systemic racism and the barriers that we have baked into the system. I'm someone who likes to go at those barriers, look at policies and practices that result in segregation, that result in placing barriers for our students. I go right at those and I confront them, call them out, and then I work with partners to address them, to create a different system that actually lives up to the ideal of equitable access for all our students. My why for why I do this is I'm a member of a marginalized group, as a member of the LGBTQ community. So I know what it is to not feel like you have a seat at the table, to be treated as though you were an imposter. My own rights were something that were on the California ballot not 40 years ago. So I really identify with individuals who are marginalized, and that's my cause, and that's what motivates me. I have 2 grandchildren who are bilingual and bicultural, and I want those children to have access to everything that they're entitled to, and that's really my why.
Thank you for your responses. We're going to move on to the next question. SCO reports providing services and oversight through a partnership with the county's 40 school districts that serve 66,500 students. Looking at data provided by the California Department of Education, Sonoma County as a whole lacks diversity with certified staff and teachers. The 2018 to 2019 academic year reports that only 7.8% out of the 4,152 teachers are Latinx. Not surprisingly, white teachers are the majority, representing 81.4%. With 8 out of 10 teachers identifying as white, one may wonder how many have received cross-cultural training for an increasingly diverse student body. Research shows that only 12% of all the teachers in the United States received 12 or fewer hours of cross-cultural training to be sensitive to the different student cultural traits that populate our classroom. For this next question, you will each have 2 minutes, and this is a 2-part question. We're going to begin with Dr. Carter, then to Mr. Coscarelli, and lastly, Mr. Calloway. As the Superintendent of Sonoma County Office of Education, please share your strategies on how you can support increasing the number of teachers that represent our BIPOC communities, especially Latinx teachers. More specifically, what can SCO provide to recruit and retain teachers? The second half of this question, with the majority of teachers identifying as white, representing the dominant culture, what professional opportunities will you provide to ensure Sonoma County teachers have professional development opportunities to be cross-culturally trained?
Thank you. Hi, this is one of my top priorities, is to really diversify the teacher pipeline here in Sonoma. There's such great research around if you're just able to hire one educator of color, that academic achievement rises across the board in all student groups. So this is something that I really want to focus on. You're absolutely right. Here in Sonoma, the individuals in the front of the classroom don't align with our student population. And that's something that we have to change. And we have to attack that on a lot of different levels. I think first of all is really engaging in heavy recruitment efforts to make sure we draw those teachers in. I believe in grow your own programs where we're going into our high schools. I've created a CTE pathway that I wrote a grant for last year to create opportunities for our high school students to get in the classrooms and get them all the way through college, tuition free, and result in the opportunity for them to teach in our classrooms. A big part of this is my push for teacher housing. We need, when those teachers are done and they have the challenges of student debt or whatever, they need the opportunity to live in this county. As you well know, this is challenging for our young people in their 20s looking for those housing opportunities. So that's another piece. I also think we have to make sure that we're a county that is accepting and embracing, and we're creating community groups for these educators so that when they're here, they feel comfortable, they feel a part of a family, and that we support them and make sure that they stay here with us. When it comes to professional development, we cannot offer enough professional learning around equity unless our educators and people in the system take the time to really reflect on their own biases. We're going to continue to have discrepancies in our outcomes. So that is work that, first and foremost, one of my first acts in my 90-day plan is to create a diversity, equity, and inclusion team at the Sonoma County Office of Ed to directly attack this challenge.
Thank you. On to Mr. Coscarelli.
Thank you, He, and thank you for asking this question. As the superintendent of Sonoma County Schools, my job is to support every student, every school, every family throughout the county. At SCO, or Sonoma County Office of Education, that is the job of SCO. We need to support. Right now, we need to do a better job. This is a major issue. When you talk about BIPOC students, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that pertains to not just students, but staff members, teachers, school employees, and all of our family members throughout Sonoma County. We have to have better training. Right now, we do not have a coherent, we do not have a consistent plan throughout the county. As the superintendent of schools, I would do that. I would bring that to the table immediately. That's part of my plan. There has to be comprehensive cultural training for all school employees, not just teachers. We have to be able to attract and recruit the very best for our students. Not only do we need to do this, but our students deserve it and our families deserve it. And how do we do that? Well, twofold. One, it's always about attraction and retention when it comes to salary and wages benefits. We have to be very competitive in Sonoma County with our wages. But we also have an amazing Santa Rosa Junior College. We have an amazing Sonoma State, and we have a program that already exists at SCO. We can bring people in, students like yourself, and take them into the teaching profession where they're already from Sonoma County. This is a really, truly important lesson. And I, again, thank you for bringing this up. Thank you.
Okay, I do know where this is going. The issue of pipelines is a serious issue of creating pipelines for young people to become teachers and educators. First and foremost, we need to actually look into the 7th grade and start that process of creating teachers in 7th grade, creating classes in 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade where students come back into the elementary level, get credit for that work, and then obviously move on to higher level education to become teachers. So creating that pipeline, getting all the way down into the 7th grade. Additionally, one of the other areas that we really need to do is actually look at the wealth that we have in our communities. We need actually to go into the community, create workshops for our families, and then create the paraeducators from those workshops. One of the great things we know about paraeducators is there's actually a program that allows paraeducators to become teachers. So if we start this process, going back into the community for our parents and adults, having them become paraeducators, eventually having them come into our campuses, which we need to engage, and then going into the Sonoma County Office of Education program for teachers through the paraeducator program. Pipelines can be created for our families through the Sonoma County Office of Education. It's extremely important because we know that we have to see the face of what we're teaching. Can you imagine a 3rd grader seeing an older student coming in and saying, that's what I want to become? equity in classes, in teachers. No question. We have to, from day one and continually, teach and create professional development opportunities for all of our schools. We need to reach out to our superintendents and bring them together. Here's going to be our plan over time. We also have to remember, we always have to continually come back to our teachers, because a one-time shot never works. Always continually educating. Thank you. I see the ring.
Thank you. The 2021 Portrait of Sonoma County reports that an even worse affordable housing shortage, economic insecurity, and disproportionate harm falling on communities of color confronts and challenge our community right now. SCO's snapshot report reveals a decrease in enrollment from 70,000 in 2016 to 2017, down to 66,000 in the 2020 to 2021 school year, a 6.3% drop. One can assume this is a result from the wildfires Sonoma County has had over the past 5 years, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the high cost of living. These circumstances make it more challenging for low-income and working-class families to make ends meet. For this next question, you will be given 90 seconds. The order will be Mr. Calloway, Dr. Carter, and Mr. Coscarelli. In your role as an elected official, what will you do to ensure SCO advocates to policy leaders to address and resolve the housing crisis?
It's a very serious issue, and I think that the superintendent of the county must be the leader in this issue. This is an educational issue because we are, on the high school level, we are creating educational pathways for students to get jobs. We must have a place for them to live if we create these job opportunities. Additionally, this is our bread and bread, because if we don't have children, then we don't have jobs as educators. So it's a much more global. I know that we've talked about teacher housing, which is important, but a more global issue. We must create workforce housing for all our families, so that we have families in this community. If we do not, we will simply gentrify our society. We won't have a rich, vibrant culture, which we need and every culture needs. We need to have a process for that. The superintendent of the county must be the leader in that format. He must reach out to Gen X housing. He must, or she must, work with any housing other opportunities that can come forward so that our families have a place to live. Thank you.
Dr. Carter, you can go ahead.
Sorry, thanks, He. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier. This is something that cuts very close to home for me. I struggled when I first was a young person and trying to take care of my family. I am someone who benefited from government assistance. It was the Medicaid program that helped pay for some of the health care for my child, for my children. I know how hard it can be. I remember falling asleep in my bed and having so many tears come out of my eyes that they welled up in my ears because I didn't know how I was going to afford my rent that month. So I'm constantly thinking through that lens. If it weren't for the school lunch program, I don't know how I would have fed my children in the summer and been able to care for them. So this is very critical to me, and I really relate. My own life was touched and benefited through a teacher housing program, a reduced housing program, and I want to continue to do that. We have an opportunity in education. We own property that is not being utilized, that we can turn into developments, and those can be housing spaces, not just for our educators and our classified staff, but for our full community. And so as we're facing this declining enrollment issue, it's time for our districts to take that property. There's an opportunity to send it over to the state that will rebuild that will build that housing for us. But it's a solvable problem. We just have to have the will to do it.
And on to you, Mr. Coscarelli.
Thank you, He. I'm glad you brought this up. This is part of the portrait of Sonoma County. You know, I have a dream, and I've told this story before. I hope one day that when I am the county superintendent, I will be traveling anywhere in the world. And when they hear that I'm from Sonoma County, they will turn to me and say, wow, I hear you have amazing schools, some of the best in the entire world. That would be my dream. And I would love to hear that. It would make me cry. I have always been vocal. I have always been an activist. We need to make housing a priority for our teachers. How do we do that? Right back to my priorities. When you attract and retain the very best, you have to offer salary and wages that are very competitive. You have to have teacher housing and school employee housing. You have to concentrate on students and parents. We have food pantries that I've created at both of my schools to help with this. When you bring all of these things to factor in as the county superintendent, this is how you bring people into Sonoma County. They want to look at our schools and they want to know that we are offering their children, our students, the very best public education. That's how you bring people back into Sonoma County. Thank you.
Thank you for your responses. On to the next question. California is considered a diverse state, and Latinx students became the majority at the end of the 2000s. Currently, the Latinx student population statewide is 55% and 47% locally. The current teaching modalities are Eurocentric and do not provide opportunities to learn about all of the different ethnicities, history, traditions, and cultures which pertain to our communities. The California State University and the California Community College systems have made ethnic studies a graduation requirement. However, the California Department of Education has not followed up on their footsteps to make multicultural studies a high school requirement. So each of you will have 90 seconds to answer the following questions. The order will be Mr. Coscarelli, Dr. Carter, then Mr. Calloway. Please share your views on multicultural studies, aka ethnic studies, the curriculum as a high school graduation requirement. Mr. Coscarelli.
Thank you. The short answer that I can give to everybody that is here tonight and listening is that I am pro ethnic studies. I believe in it. I think it's healthy. I think it's good for our community and good for our state. And I think it's good for our nation and our world. I wish, as the next county superintendent, I had the power to snap my fingers and make it a graduation requirement, not just for students in Sonoma County, but across the state and our nation and throughout the world. I truly believe in it. Not only do I believe in cultural proficiency and professional development for our teachers and our school employees, but we also have to have our children study and learn, and this is part of it. This is a critical aspect. I wish that we could have it in our elementaries and our middles as well, but bottom line, you have my promise. This is something that I believe in, and I would continue to be vocal about and activist about. I believe in this for our schools. Thank you.
Thanks. I do want to correct the record on this. In 25-26, the state of California is requiring graduates to have completed an ethnic studies course. I think that's a big step forward for us. My work in the county office, I lead the team that is bringing ethnic studies to our county, where I work in Marin, and I know that work is also being done in Sonoma. When you're looking at this ethnic studies piece, I think it's imperative for our students to see themselves in the curriculum. That is how you increase engagement. That is how you increase a student's sense of what can be accomplished. And that is how all our students can understand their contribution to the American story. I think ethnic studies is a problematic term for me because in my mind, all that's happening in ethnic studies is we're telling the truth about America. We are telling the truth about the contribution of the Latinx community, of the Black community, of the Asian community, and we need to keep doing more of that. I think it's something that we have to educate our community about. This false signal around critical race theory is ridiculous. It's one that I address every day in my work. I've prepared a lot of written documents to educate my community about the difference between the ethnic studies and critical race theory. And I do the work every day to make sure that our parents understand the incredible value that exists in ethnic studies. I love that it's going to be a course for our graduates in 25, 26. And I think we need to just continue to do that work. Students should see themselves in their curriculum every day.
Obviously, as Dr. Carter shared, 25, 26, that will be the senior class. We need to reach into ethnic studies so that every student obviously is valued. We also need to look at it from a continuum. We can start in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, stories, books from the library, from the community, bringing them in, telling their story, and giving that piece so that families of their family values can be shared along our continuum of education, not just in our senior year. Because if we wait for our senior year, all those children have gone through from TK all the way to 11th grade. All of a sudden, we're going to create an ethnic study that year and everybody's going to learn? No, we need to go all the way back to TK again and start that process. Give those information to our children. Let's have those discussions, rich discussions about why we are important to each other and to learn from each other. It is so imperative that our country doesn't get blinded. We are a rich nation of families. Thank you.
And on to you, Mr. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Los Cien Sonoma County Latino leaders have invested in creating the 2021 Sonoma County Latino Economic Scorecard. To give context, it highlights 6 high-level economic indicators that demonstrate opportunities and gaps. One of the indicators identified looks at degree attainment. In our county, only 15% of Latinx 25 years or older hold a bachelor's degree compared to 40% of white 25-year-olds or older. You all will have 90 seconds to answer this question. We will start with Dr. Carter, followed by Mr. Calloway, and then Mr. Coscarelli. In your opinion, what leads to the disparity in college attendance and completion? When you are elected, how will you ensure SCO changes the narrative of college-going rates? And from your experience as school administrators, what programs can you recommend to your allies to increase college admissions awareness?
Thank you. My son-in-law came over to California from Mexico when he was 14. And I like to sit across from him and hear his stories. And the way he describes the education system that he walked into was, he says, everything told me I did not belong. And I think that we sometimes as an educational system don't engage in the efforts that are required to make sure that our Latinx students have access to college, have access to those career opportunities. One of the things I did while I was principal at Rancho Cotati High School, and you can look at the record, I really increased the number of students of color who were graduating there at Rancho. But one of the things that I did was I hired 3 Latinx school counselors. And that alone made a great difference. But we also started looking at the data and figuring out where were we losing those students. Many times it had to do with A through G enrollment. And so we had to go back, rethink how we were enrolling students. We would see kids that were getting off A through G track from freshman year. And that one of the reasons was we offered a science class that simply didn't meet A through G. So I stepped in, I said, this science class, we're not offering it anymore. Every child is getting enrolled in biology, which is an A through G credit. We're not going to segregate at the doorway. I got rid of math segregation. We enrolled our students right into algebra. It's a system change, and I highly recommend the work of 10,000 Degrees.
On to you, Mr. Calloway.
Thank you. The issue becomes apparent because we need to create first upstream investments. We need to start, as I bring forward, starting to make sure every child is a reader by 3rd grade and having every child have an opportunity. Because if you have the ability to read and comprehend, and you can then do complex thinking. So when you walk in the door in kindergarten, we can work with you to become a reader, but we need to actually work at the age of 2 on this process. Because if you do not have a rich vocabulary background in the reading process, which is auditory, which means you're hearing and listening to vocabulary, rich text, and it can be in any language. If you don't have that process going on in your community, in your house, you can be 1 million words behind another family who had those means when you start kindergarten. Therefore, you start at that process. You target those students. You work with that. You look at a program like Dibbles as a progress monitoring process to identify the progress of those students. When you have the opportunity, those students then can become A through G students and attack anything they want to do. It is so imperative that we create upstream investments so that we can have downstream success for every child in this community.
Thank you, He, for bringing this up. We do need to raise the rates for all of our BIPOC and Latinx students. It is a detriment to our students, and it is horrible for our community. My 3 priorities go right back to this. When you put all students first, when you look at fiscal management and where all of our districts are spending their funds, are they truly supporting all students? When we're talking about attracting and retaining the very best teachers, we talk about equity a lot. We have to be careful, and we have to make sure that all of our students engaged. Part of this is access. Students, all students, need access to all of the courses at their high school. I personally take, and I would perform this as Sonoma County Superintendent throughout the entire county, I take a whole child philosophy, much like a community school, where I look at the whole child, not just how they're doing at school, but what is going on in their life. What's going on with their family. I did this at Santa Rosa High, and we had great success with this. I got to know and learn my students. I built relationships. That was incredibly important. And last but not least, before I run out of time, while I was principal at Santa Rosa High, I hired a dedicated college and career counselor for our students. Thank you.
Thank you for your responses.
Thank you.
Families of color, in particular, can struggle with navigating the education system. Families that are new to the country have a harder time breaking into the conversation surrounding school and the school community. Many will tune out of the discourse about the direction of education in their community due to language, cultural, or other barriers. You will have 2 minutes each to answer, and I will ask this question first to Mr. Calloway, then to Mr. Coscarelli, then Dr. Carter. What steps would you take toward making schools, teachers, and administrators more accessible to Spanish-speaking, immigrant, and English language learner families, And how do you plan on providing these families with the pathways, opportunities, and resources available to them and their children? How will you make sure to include their voices in future decision-making?
As I mentioned earlier, we have to go into the wealth of assets in our community, in our community. We need to go to them, not have our children have the community come to us. We need to be into that. We need to provide resources, have administrators, teachers going into community, and then creating workshops, creating opportunities to listen to their stories, to hear from them, make them feel that they're being heard. One of the great things is we always say, we're going to go there. We go, but we don't listen. And then we don't do anything beyond that. So we need to listen. Then we need to create a plan, a strategic plan with actionable items. And then we need to come back to that community to show how we worked with them and with them through this process, targeting that process of education and bringing in that community to our schools. So the next step, after we've gone there, we actually want to have them come into the school, because we know that if a family is connected to the school, then the child will be connected to the school. And that educational process will be much better for everybody. But again, it doesn't begin with them coming to the school first. It comes with us going to the community first. That additionally, as we move through this process, we need to bring in rich resources from the community, nonprofits, faith-based organizations to help support that. Because we do know that faith-based organizations are a place that many people feel very comfortable with. So we need to go into those places as another means to work with families so that we are all working together for the benefit of every single child in this county. Thank you.
On to you, Mr. Coscarelli.
Thank you. You know, this is really a strength of mine. I take a lot of pride in this. As the principal of Santa Rosa High School, this was my main philosophy. I truly built strong relationships with my staff, my students, my school community, and my families. And having worked at Santa Rosa High School for many, many years, my school was the biggest, right? I know you go to Pioneer, and that's a great school. But I love Santa Rosa High School, and it's a school of 2,100 kids. That is larger than most of the districts in Sonoma County. What does it take? It takes visibility. I am at every event. I am meeting my parents wherever they're at. I talk about relationships. That is a key. I talk about clear and concise communication out to my parents in any language that they need. They are learning our public education school system, and communication is critical. I talk about the whole child and our community schools, and having our schools be part of the community that builds support for every child, every community member in our area. And finally, I want to add, we need to have fun activities, math nights, science nights, all kinds of family nights. Maybe we just watch a movie. I've done all of these things at my schools to great success. And this brings in all the families that I have that are new to public education, new to education in the United States or into Sonoma County. And it has really, really worked for me. I've had great success with this. Thank you.
So I really saw this challenge firsthand when I was principal at the K-8 in Cotati, Thomas Page. It was like living in two worlds. I had my white parents were involved in PTA and doing certain activities. And then my Spanish speaking and parents of color, they were not involved in those spaces. And I worked with them in the DLAC. And we had a lot of conversations around what can schools be doing better to ensure that you feel like this is your home. And I continually talk to parents who feel those obstacles and remind them that they have a right. They have a right to be in those spaces. They have a right to have a voice in their children's education. And I create those spaces so that is something that feels comfortable. I really focus on hiring Spanish-speaking employees so that everything that is available in both English and Spanish for those individuals, and making sure that there's constantly material that's pushed out, whether that be videos or bilingual handouts. I want to make sure that there's ease of access into the system. We're a system that creates these systemic barriers, and we've got to look at them. Part of the work that I did at Rancho Cotati High School was we noticed that our students of color weren't enrolling in our AP classes. And so I went to my teachers and I said, hey, we've got to do this differently. We started looking at some of the barriers. We had a teacher referral system. We had kids who had to do summer assignments. We had all these gatekeeping metrics that kept kids out of those classes. And I said, let's change that. Let's do this differently. So we took a whole different approach. We actively recruited students of color. We looked at their PSAT scores and we let them know, you have a right to be in an AP class. You're going to do well. We're not worried about your GPA. We know that you're going to be successful. Because of this work, we were one of 250 schools that were recognized nationally by the College Board. You've got to go at those barriers. You've got to make sure that they disappear.
Thank you. This next question, you will each have 90 seconds to respond. The order will be Mr. Coscarelli, Dr. Carter, and then lastly, Mr. Calloway. What will be your approach to addressing the controversy about law enforcement on school campuses? Where do you stand on this issue? Mr. Coscarelli?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I thought there was more to the question. My apologies. I have worked with law enforcement over the years, and while I was at Santa Rosa High School, we did have school resource officers. The issue that is surrounding this debate right now is what kind of support can we provide our students? We all should be worried about school safety. We have to practice our safety drills. We have to make sure that our students know that our schools are safe and a welcoming environment for them to learn in. We all know that students that do not feel safe, that haven't been fed or haven't had a good night's sleep, aren't going to be learning like they should. As a superintendent of schools, we have to immediately put plans into place comprehensively throughout the county for all of our students, including our BIPOC students, to make them feel comfortable and safe. That means more support, more personnel at our schools. It could be a student advisor, it could be teachers, it could be counselors, it could be folks to help with social, emotional, or academic learning. Whatever that takes, we have to get those personnel on campus so that our students feel safe and comfortable and learning can take place. Thank you.
And on to you, Dr. Carter.
Thank you, sorry. So as a high school principal, and of course, as an assistant principal, I've worked with police officers on my campus. And I've seen models that are successful. I've had police officers who have taught my students through career technical education courses. And I think there's a difference when you have those officers as members of your teaching staff. So I have had some positive experiences. That said, I know there are many voices out there who have not had those same experiences, who experience policing that can be racist, can be biased, can be overly harsh. And so I think this is a topic where I think the community has the opportunity to decide. And in that conversation, we have to elevate student voice. Our students are the ones that are on that campus, and they're the ones that are experiencing the work of the SRO. And so I think that we have to start there. I'm also a big believer in creating spaces that are safe for students. I've done a lot of work to create wellness centers so that students that are looking for support, whether that be mental health support or having conflict or crisis, that they can go to a resource that is much more anchored in kindness and skill building, in support, and not taking a punitive stance to what tends to be adolescent growth challenges. So I say, listen to our students and follow their lead.
As an administrator, like Mr. Coscarelli and Dr. Carter, I've worked with SROs, staff on school campuses. And obviously, over the years, we've seen a great disconnect and unfortunately, a great situation, a sad situation where we have diverse ideas of why about being safe on a campus. We need to start from day one. We've got to we need to have student voices. We need to have town hall meetings basically at the schools so that we can hear, students can hear from officers, but most importantly, officers and police can hear from the students and the families about why there's a disconnect, what their fears are, and continue those town hall meetings. Because if we don't start a dialogue, if we don't have conversations, then we continue to keep in our own little silos. And that is not a rich community. That's a very poor community. We might not always agree, but if we cannot discuss it, we can't have tough conversations. As it was mentioned earlier, we have to have tough conversations. We have to have people sharing their feelings so that they're heard and listened to. We can move forward, however program, but we need to start with the listening side of this. Thank you.
For this next question, you will have 90 seconds each. The order will be Dr. Carter, Mr. Calloway, and then on to Mr. Coscarelli. Sonoma County has generational issues with racial harassment and discrimination in our schools and a pattern of systemic Title VI violations. SCO is the fiscal agent for districts that accept federal funds. As superintendent, what would you do to ensure that districts are in compliance with federally mandated civil rights protections for students?
So I currently do this work now, and what we do in my role is we're checking in with districts periodically. It's too late when you're waiting for federal investigators to come to your campus. That's letting it go too far. So you have to go have ongoing monitoring. You have to make sure that you're offering education and training for everyone involved with schools so that they are understanding their responsibilities under Title VI. I think it's an area that we have to continue to focus on. I think there's a lot of practices that simply just get passed on unchallenged. And I want to build the capacity of our school leaders to address those challenges, to go directly at it. There's Seth's Law recently is something that affects our schools. And what Seth's Law says is that if you're a bystander and you're an educator and you're a bystander and you're watching the mistreatment of a student, that you are personally liable. So I really take that seriously. And I want to make sure that all our educators in Sonoma County understand that they have a responsibility ethically and legally to intervene when they see racist behavior or behavior that in any way singles out marginalized groups and makes them feel unwelcome or uncomfortable or targeted. This is an imperative. There's just no middle ground on this. It has to be done, and I'd continue to advance that cause throughout our county.
Mr. Calloway.
The moral imperative to ensure that every child feels safe and has all their rights met. No question. You need to create an educational piece for all faculty so they understand. So you need to begin that process before you get to the end process. So you need to have ongoing training for all staff. That's one thing that the County Office of Education can do. Along with equity training, they can create training on this area. We need to hear how and why things happen, obviously, and to correct them. But we also, before we get down this road, education, listening to those in need and finding their way. If we do not create a professional development plan, these things will continue to happen. The more you work on it, the better outcomes they will be. We also need to continue onboarding our new staff, because if you don't onboard new staff, they will not get the information. So it's a circular information cycle that we need to do. I do not want any child to feel that they are not welcome, and we need to work on the question.
Thank you, He. You know, this goes right back to what I was saying earlier. I believe that every school should be a family, should be a community school. Every family, every student, every teacher, every employee on that campus should feel safe, and they should feel welcome, and they should be there to learn. Title VI, civil rights protections, that's exactly what I would focus on as Sonoma County Superintendent. In fact, under AB 1200, that is my statutory duty. As Sonoma County Superintendent, I have a duty to visit schools, to get out and to visit not just low-performing schools, but all schools. And that helps build relationships, and it makes me visible so that people know that I do care about all of my students, all of my families, all of my schools. As Sonoma County Superintendent, it's exactly what we talked about earlier. We have to educate, and we have to train not just our teachers, but our administrators, our district office, everyone that works in public education throughout the county on Title VI, because it is a civil right for our students. They have to feel warm, welcome, and comfortable at the school. It is their right. They should have just the same fairness our BIPOC students that all of our students should have. So this is a main issue for me. Thank you.
You have 90 seconds to answer this next question. The order will be Mr. Calloway, Mr. Coscarelli, and lastly, Dr. Carter. Tonight, you each referred to all students and every child many times. While good in theory, leading in equity means that we are brave enough to voice that some students need more than others from their school districts. What will you say to parents who are resistant to allocating extra resources to students, schools, and districts that serve marginalized communities because their own more privileged children may get less than they are accustomed to?
Goes back to one thing. Do we want a community, or do we want a separation, which is not what we want? We need every child to be valued in our community. We need to provide all the resources necessary so that child from a certain area gets the same experience, same education as another child from a different area code. If we do not do that, we remain in the same situation we have been for the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. It is, as I mentioned earlier, a moral imperative. We must change the system. We must provide additional resources into those communities so that children can make a difference in wherever they want. They can choose whatever path they want. They can become whatever they want. Because if we don't do that, then we are not making a difference in a child's life. And if that is our job as educators, to make a difference in a child's life, then we provide every and all means of resources to that community. And we must, as administrators, teachers, educators, community members, stand up to anybody who says otherwise and look them in the face and say, this will not happen here. We will put all resources and means into any community that needs it, and we will be successful for every child in this county.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is truly, truly important, and it gets close to my heart. I have this conversation. I've had it multiple times. And after I have spoken to parents and community members, then we understand and we come to an agreement. And the discussion is what's important. You know, for me, this is really a twofold question. As the county superintendent, I would fight for our students. I would fight for our families, just like I always have throughout my career. I would go to the state and federal level to make sure that we have funding, per pupil funding, for all of our students. Right now, we have the richest state in America, and yet we are 36th in spending on pupils. That's an embarrassment. I would fight for all of our students with special education. It needs to be fully funded, and yet it's not. I would go back into our districts, and I would make sure that budget-wise, we cut through the bureaucracy, and we were making sure that every student, all of our BIPOC students, have every support in place that they need. We need to get those funds back into the classroom, into the hands of the teachers for our students. Thank you.
This is a great question. It's really about courageous leadership. You know, there's a lot of people in our field that can play lip service to all children, but you really have to, you know, ask yourself about the track record. I've had this exact scenario multiple times in my career. I worked in the Central Valley, and we started giving our struggling Latinx students extra resources, including an after-school program. And I heard this criticism: "Hey, what about our kids? Hey, this isn't fair." Through that work, my school earned the Distinguished School Awards for closing the achievement gap. We were celebrated for that. And when we got to that place, it was just interesting that those same voices were silent. You have to look at the root causes of what is causing these inequities in our society. And it is because some get more and some get less. We just came out of that pandemic, and there were kids who actually did very well, that learned a lot. And we can describe their households for you. There was college-educated parents who worked from home, a hot meal, strong Wi-Fi. They had, on-site tutoring. Your family resources should not be the thing that dictates your success in this world. And so I am a human being that puts myself in the educational system to make sure that that promise is delivered. We talk a lot about what education will offer our children, but it's all lip service unless we actually meet their needs and stand up in the face of this kind of criticism.
Thank you all for your responses. We're going to move on to closing statements. You'll have 90 seconds each. We're going to start with Mr. Coscarelli, on to Dr. Carter, and lastly, Mr. Calloway. Mr. Coscarelli, go ahead.
Thank you, He. Well, first, let me say it's been an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. I truly appreciate these questions. They are significant and critical to our BIPOC students here in Sonoma County. Los Cien has a message about bringing belonging and trust and equity to our community. And those are not just words, they are something that I truly believe in as well. Here's what I would ask everyone that is listening tonight. Please do your homework. I know you will. Go to my website. It's really simple. It's just my name, bradcoscarelli.com. Take a look at what I say, what I will do, what I have done. look at my long list of endorsements, and make the best decision that you can. I hope tonight that I have earned your trust, that I have earned your endorsement and your vote for the June election coming up. So, you know, I hope all of you have learned that throughout my career, I have fought for our children. And when I say all children, it's exactly like you asked, all of our children in Sonoma County. I fight for our families, I fight for our educators, and I truly want to make our schools the best in the world in Sonoma County. So thank you for having me here tonight. Very much appreciated.
Dr. Carter.
So my personality style is I'm a crusader. When you look me up on the Myers-Briggs, that's my personality style. If you're looking for someone to maintain the status quo, I'm not your candidate. I am someone who has a track record. I've built a teacher pipeline for students of color. I have challenged math pathways where students are segregated when they come into the school doorways. I've challenged that. My work has earned me the Distinguished School Award at my K-8 school for closing the opportunity gap. I've been recognized nationally for my work with getting students of color into AP classes. This is really why I'm running. This is my cause. And when it comes to discrimination against students of color, I'll be the first one to call the Office of Civil Rights. I am here to fight for people like me who are marginalized, who have had that experience, who don't always get a seat at the table. And it's my job to make sure that seat is pulled out for our students of color, for our Latinx community. I believe in it. I want to create in Sonoma County the privileges that I would want my son-in-law, my grandchildren to have. And it just takes will. It takes a relentless focus. It takes a willingness to be courageous, to speak up, to confront the challenges in our system. And that is who I am.
Every week during the year, I teach first grade reading. And I'm going to bring attention to a young boy. His name is Isaac. He's a Latino boy. He comes from a very difficult background. There's no question. He's a bright boy. And he's in one of my reading groups. And I have watched him struggle at the beginning. And now you can see him reading. He works so hard every day. His sight words, his phonemic awareness, his ability now to put sentences together. His trajectory is going forward. You can see it coming. I see it in his Dibble scores. There's a joy in this boy. And I reflect upon him as every child in our community. To have the opportunity, any opportunity, whether it's a college, into a mechanical engineering degree, whether it's into some workforce area in technology, whether it's in hospitality, but to have the dream and to provide that dream for that child. Why do I do this? For Isaac. Thank you.
So that's going to do it for our questions portion of today. A big thank you again to all of the candidates who were here and helping the community to make their informed decisions. I'm going to hand it off now back to Fernando to close off the forum for tonight.
What a great night. Thank you so very much to all of the candidates. And your participation and candor was so amazing to hear from you. I also want to say thank you to you. You really make an impression on us. And thank you for stepping up and helping us. You know, it was short notice, so I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been the second of a series of 3 debates. And on April 28th, the candidates for Sonoma County Sheriff will join us on our final debate. That event will be virtual, and it will start at 7 p.m. and it will be moderated by Elliot Enriquez, Program Manager at Petaluma Health Center. All of our debates will be available on Los Cien of Sonoma County YouTube page shortly thereafter. Los Cien continues to host challenging conversations to make Sonoma County a better place for all of us. To register for these debates, go to our website, which is www.loscien.org. And finally, if you would like to join us by becoming a member or a partner, please also visit our website. We can have all a role in empowering our Latinx community here in Sonoma County. As we say, issues that affect Latinx people affect us all. Please consider joining us. It will be an honor to have you. With that, have a great evening. And I also want to say thank you to the team. You guys are amazing. Muy buenas noches y gracias por estar con nosotros.